Welcome to Character in Action with Matthew J. Norcross, the official podcast of the 7 Degrees of Change Foundation. Come journey with us on the real-life stories of character in action. And now here's your host, Matthew J. Norcross.
Hello and welcome to Character in Action. I'm Matthew J. Norcross here in the studio with the great Robbie Dilmore. Today we have a special guest with us, and I am proud to say he is a friend and colleague of mine at Phoenix Academy and a proud member of the 7 Degrees of Change Foundation team, Dr. Howard Coleman, often referred to as Buddy Coleman. He's a leadership coach who received his doctorate degree in philosophy at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill in 1987 and became an associate professor at UNC Wilmington in 2005. He retained that position until 2013 when he became an associate professor at Coastal Carolina University with a specialty in teaching educational leadership. In 2017, Coleman left the world of colleges and universities and joined Phoenix Academy as a member of its team of principals. He currently leads the school's middle-high campus. He joins us here in the studio. Buddy, thank you for joining us.
Hey, glad to be here, Matt.
Now, you're here because you're a living example of character in action. Now, before we get started, can you please tell our listeners more about yourself?
Well, always been in education, always committed to public education, and got very interested in working with charter schools. I'd also served as a high school principal in Charlotte and Raleigh. Also served as deputy superintendent and was a superintendent for a few years. And then I decided to teach, and I started a doctoral program at UNC Wilmington, Educational Administration and Leadership, and really saw this charter movement as something that I was interested in. I actually did 50% of my research on charter schools, and I worked with charter schools both in North Carolina and South Carolina when I was a professor.
Well, so those of us who are totally ignorant, namely me, what's a charter school?
Well, a charter school is a public school. A lot of people are confused about that. It doesn't cost any money. And anyone in, for example, North Carolina and the whole state can attend any charter school in the state as long as they can provide their own transportation. Some charter schools do that, some don't. And the money that pays the tuition for charter schools comes from your tax dollars that would traditionally go to the public school in that county. And instead, that money is sent to the charter school, and that's where we get our funding. And it comes from your property taxes that normally go for any public education. But charter schools are public schools. They're open to anyone, but they're usually smaller, so we have to have a lottery, and it's based on application and literally pull numbers out of a barrel to say, okay, you're coming in, and you have a limited number of slots. So, for example, now at Phoenix Academy, where I am, we have 1,400 students coming to us next year. We run from K through 12, and we have a lottery, and we have a waiting list of about 200 students trying to get in.
So from your perspective, just curiously, why charter schools? What was the need? Why don't public schools fit the bill, or why isn't a private school, or how did that fit into the equation?
Well, I'm actually writing a book about that. It's called Leveling the Playing Field. Parents don't have a choice with traditional public schools. It's based on your zip code. So wherever you live says you go to that school. It can be a really good school, an average school, or a failing school. And for those parents, unless they were of means that could afford a private education, there was no school of choice for them. So back in 1999 in Minnesota, one of the first charter organizations started to say, wait a minute, we think every family should have choice and the option to go to a school where their children will be able to maximize their potential in learning. And that started that movement. And now you have them all across the United States. And we moved in North Carolina from a cap of 100 charter schools about 7 years ago. Now we have over 275 charter schools. And that was really to give parents a choice. They're smaller. Everyone wants to be there. Like my teachers want to be there. I want to be there. The parents want to be there. And it's usually a smaller school so that you can maintain better discipline, higher academics. And I also did some research on how charter school students do in higher education. They typically outperform traditional public school students because of that special attention, and they may have a much higher matriculation or graduation rate in getting their undergraduate degrees.
Matriculation, okay, you got me again.
That's completing the 4 years of college successfully, not 6 or 7 years.
Okay.
Because there's the 60% dropout rate in college. People don't talk about that, but people start college and only about 40% ever get the degree. Well, our charter students have a much higher success rate, is what matriculation means. They get out of there in 4 years with a degree.
That's good.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
I learned a big word today. I'm going to go home and try it on my wife, Matt.
Yeah.
That's pretty good. That's pretty good. Yeah.
So my question to you is, charter schools are also, Phoenix Academy also has character education as part of its curriculum. How do you define character?
Yeah, and I've been involved in character education even as a high school principal. I learned a long time ago that if you want to get their minds, you got to get their hearts too. And so you got to have that holistic approach to that. And I've always defined character like this. In fact, I put it in my articles in my book. It's how someone acts in all situations, particularly when nobody's looking. So that you're going to maintain a moral focus when you're dealing with others in all situations, and particularly in your personal decisions. And that's maintaining the right choices, having respect for all persons, and always trying to do the right thing. And that's what we preach in our charter school. And we have one of those moral focus statements every morning after our Pledge of Allegiance.
Yep. Respect. That's actually the first question I'm going to ask you is about respect. So from the perspective of a leadership coach and someone who is a part of the principal's team at Phoenix, how do you think we can rekindle the trait of respect today?
Well, first and foremost, by modeling our behaviors. I mean, we spend a lot of time training our teachers in terms of having those positive behaviors anytime they interact with a student. Not focusing so much on the behaviors, but on how can we coach that person to start looking inward to say, am I making good choices here? And again, that's being positive, encouraging people and rewarding those positive behaviors, but also extinguishing those inappropriate behaviors. One of the things I'm really concerned about is school culture, that it needs to be a safe place. You need to be sure that the parents and the children feel very safe when they come to school each day. And I'm a big proponent of, positive discipline because, and I get one thing that attracted me to charter schools is it reminds me when I went to school. We didn't have all these issues. I mean, we were respectful of teachers, we followed the rules, and we got rewards for that. And we really promote that in our charter, and most successful charters do. It's another thing people don't realize about charter schools. Charter schools are a year-to-year school. People vote with their feet. And if that charter school is not successful, you'll lose your parents and your students, and that's why many of them are closed. If they're not doing a good job, parents will go somewhere else.
Yeah, I can definitely see where you're going with that. And as one of your coworkers, I should have known about this too, So being a high school principal, not only that, but you were also part of UNCW and Coastal. Those were big responsibilities. And being in the education business as long as you have, how have you managed that responsibility as well as balancing professional and family life for as long and lucrative of a career as you had?
Well, I was very lucky. My mentors at Chapel Hill, they stressed as much keeping the O in your soul there as well as what you were doing in terms of your work. And as my dad always told me, if you like what you do, you don't work a single day.
Yeah.
And I love my job. It can be stressful, but it's the most fulfilling job I've ever had because you're changing people's lives. You're helping people that might not be helped anywhere else. And one thing I like about charter schools, and I've noticed in the research, particularly the recent research, charter schools do very well with lower socioeconomic students that have difficulties and problems, and we've had some great success with that. In fact, we have a significant population of special education students that we've been very successful with.
Yep. So another aspect of teaching at a charter school, running a charter school, is you have to teach fairness to your students. Not only that, but you have to show fairness yourself. Now the question is, how would you define fairness, and how would you want people to demonstrate this trait, both in their professional lives and their personal lives?
I think it starts with being impartial without favoritism. And I took a lot of school law courses at Chapel Hill and ended up teaching school law at the university for 11 years. And I always go back to what the attorney will ask you: what would a reasonable person do in this situation? And how you respond that way. And if you think about that before you make a decision or a response, you'll usually make a better choice. And I always told my doctoral students that I trained that if you make a decision that's based on what's good for that student, you'll typically make very good decisions. And that fairness comes about that I don't show favoritism, and I look at what's the right thing to do in this situation that maximizes the goodness for all parties concerned, but also make sure that that student's going to be successful.
Yeah, I can definitely see where you're going with that. It is definitely something for our listeners to think about. Right, Robbie?
That's a beautiful answer.
Yeah, it's definitely something to think about. Now, not another aspect that students need to learn about, especially when at Phoenix, is trustworthiness. Now, I spoke with a High Point martial arts instructor named Steve Snyder this past fall. He is a Taekwondo instructor in High Point. And he told me that trustworthiness is based on being honest and truthful. Now, my question to you is, how do you expect trustworthiness to be learned by kids?
Again, I think it's by modeling that behavior and gaining their trust and always being honest, because I don't always make the best choices, even after 30 years in this business. And when I make a mistake, I admit it and I apologize for it. And I've got more followership from kids when they say, hey, you actually make mistakes too. I said, we always do. We're human. But being honest and truthful, and I find it particularly in dealing with parents, because every parent loves their child. And they want their child to get the very best. So particularly in dealing with discipline situations, I spend a lot of time gaining the trust of my parents. They know I'm not targeting their child, I'm helping their child, and I communicate with them and I always give second chances. It's the other thing I like about being in education. Everybody gets second chances here.
Yeah.
And they get ready for life when they come out. But I found that being honest and truthful and not pretending to be something you're not, and always saying what is real and not expecting unrealistic expectations. But more importantly, when the students see you that and they trust you, you can get that followership. It's my definition of leadership. I used to ask my students in the first class, in my leadership class, define leadership for me. And they give me all these illustrious answers. Oh, you got to do this. You got to have that personality. You got to have this. I said, nope, there's only one thing. A leader has followers. If you don't have followers, you're not a leader. So you got to get them to follow you. And that means everyone in the school, that comes from your coworkers, your board of education, and you get the students to follow you and the teachers to follow you. And that followership permeates the whole organization. Yep.
Honesty and truthfulness. That is something everybody should have in their minds, especially these days, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, the truth is very important, and I think it relates to being a citizen, too. We preach citizenship to what is important to be a member of that school community, your local community, and then the larger state community and the nation. And Aristotle said this. I mean, Aristotle made it clear, if you don't have a strong middle class, you don't have a country. Yeah. And that's why it's important to really push that family value, and that those people understand that we're all in this together and that we support each other. And to me, that's citizenship. You're going to do the right thing. You're going to support the country, your state, your community, and your public school as well, which includes charter schools.
Yep. Yeah. So another important aspect of character, especially at Phoenix, is caring. And throughout your career, you've expected the best out of your students, especially during your tenures at both UNCW and at Coastal. And my question to you is, how do you demonstrate the trait of caring as an educator?
I go back to someone I studied that created those kind bars. If you've ever seen those kind bars, he was all about kindness and being kind. And I mean, it may sound trite, but he really created this whole following, started his company with that. And it's being kind to people and caring. And that starts with listening skills. People ask me, how are you successful dealing with people with different cultures and different views, and they come in and they're upset about their kids? The first thing I do is say, hi, I'm Dr. Coleman, how can I help you? And that immediately lets the person know that you're going to be listening to them. And listening to people, a lot of times, in fact, 99% of the time, people just want you to listen to them. And it shows you care. And so I may not be able to fix everything, but I'm going to do the best I can because I know it's important to you that I resolve this issue for you.
Exactly.
So a kindness bar, I apologize. Now that you lost me again, what's a kindness bar?
Well, it's actually called Kind. It's K-I-N-D. If you go in the grocery store, there are Kind bars. And the guy that is behind that corporation, he's promotes kindness, and that's why I called it a kind bar. And his company has kindness all through it.
So it's a candy bar?
It's a candy. Yeah, it's like one of those granola type
Oh,
bars.
okay.
He has
Granola.
different, yeah, if you look in, it's usually in one of the special sections that says kind, and they'll have all kinds of flavors and stuff. But he actually built that company that's a multi-million-dollar company based on that.
Wow.
Quite an amazing story, buddy.
Yeah.
I didn't know. Now I know when I look in the grocery
Yeah.
store.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's I gotta tell you, I've seen those kind bars at the grocery store as well, and I never knew the whole story behind.
Yeah, pull him up on Google and you'll see the whole story, how that's his philosophy, and I think he's written a book about it too as well. So
Yeah, quite an amazing story. Now, you mentioned citizenship, Dr. Coleman, and what does it mean as someone who is currently a part of the Phoenix Academy principals team and a board member of the 7 Degrees of Change Foundation to be a good citizen?
Well, we look at it as committing to, following the standards, the responsibilities, and the expectations. Whatever you put out there is that this is who we are. This is what we're all about. If you're going to be a good Phoenix Academy citizen, a good county citizen, a good state citizen, a good national citizen, that means that you meet those standards and expectations. And our country has been founded on that. I mean, when you look at our founding fathers, I mean, they built that in, just like they expected most businesses to give back to the community.
Right.
That was the whole point of that is, yeah, you can make all this money and you can have these things, but now you've got to give back to the community. And that citizenship is what brings us together as one whole. If you don't have that, you don't have a country. And if you don't have people that believe in that and have that same belief system, you'll never have that unity that we need to make us strong.
Yeah, that's become a big problem in our country. That's for sure.
Sure.
Yeah. So, but the last character trait I like to talk to you about is empathy, because that is another incredibly important trait to learn, especially these days. Now, Phoenix Academy, for those listeners who don't know, it was founded in 1996, and we were founded to cater to the needs of students of all walks of life, especially those who learn differently from others. How do you empathize with those students?
Well, you have to have the ability to understand and share the feelings of another one. And I learned a lot of that, and I have a master's in counseling psychology, so a lot of what I do is looking at what is that person feeling, what's important to them, and that you're back to the caring part of that. I make sure that they know it's real, that I generally care about what they're talking to me about, and that I want to make them feel comfortable to talk to me about anything. I do a lot of counseling in this role, even as the dean at Phoenix. I have students that they'll be having trouble, and they'll ask that, can I go see Dr. Coleman? They come in and they can talk to me about anything. And just that 15 minutes in the middle of the day can really cut down on discipline problems they might be having because they're having an emotional issue or they're upset, or the teacher said something that upset them. I said, well, don't take it out in there. Raise your hand, come talk. You can tell me anything and get here, and then I can send you back and you can go back to learning. But you have to create that safe space for them that says, okay, I can trust this person. They're not going to be judgmental on me. And I don't try to tell them what to do. I try them to really walk through their own decision-making. Is this a good choice? What do you think is going to happen if you make this choice versus another choice?
Yeah.
And that usually works. And again, most people just want to be heard. And if you listen to them, they feel better. And that's really what a lot of therapy is anyway. A lot of people go to these psychologists and psychiatrists. They're just listening to you and let you talk through your own problems. That Carl Rogers, that Rogerian therapy, he was a very famous counselor. He actually called it guided counseling, where he let the patient actually decide how they were going to solve their problem. And that's the best way to do it, because then they decide themselves.
Guided counseling. I don't think I've ever heard that term before, to be honest, buddy.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really called client-centered, and in simple terms, it says, if I'm talking to you, I'll say, Matt, well, tell me what's going on that you're struggling with. And then I keep asking you probing questions so that you're actually making your own decisions about, well, how can I get out of this matrix that I'm in that's making me feel this way?
Yeah. So I got to ask you something very important. I'd like you to tell me a story of witnessing either in person or in history. Someone that was a true Phoenix to you. Someone that was a role model, leading by example, and making the world a better place.
Yeah, I had a special education teacher, working with a child with special needs at Phoenix Academy, and worked closely with a student who was really struggling not only academically but behaviorally. And I was so impressed that she was able to coach and model, and she was relentless with that. She wouldn't quit. A lot of this is seeing it to the end. And she made a dramatic transformation in that student, and the student was very successful, did very well, even exceeded his expectations, which the data said he wouldn't be able to do that. And I think it was her putting all of her force of her personality and caring that made that happen. To me, that was something very successful. You can't put a price on that either. I mean, those are the kind of people you want to have in your school. And as a principal, I felt very strong. I was in an inner city school in Charlotte. It was 78% Title I, which means it was all lower socioeconomic. I had several boys change their disruptive behaviors. I mean, they were headed to graduation or prison. I had to get them off that train. And, I really pushed it. I pulled them in. I held them accountable, but also kept working with their parents. And we eventually were able to extinguish those inappropriate behaviors. It took me a couple of years, but they actually graduated. And, where instead of going down that wrong path, it was because I said they were more important than the kids that were doing very well. I needed to pull them in and say, hey, you've got the right stuff. You just need to make better choices. And I'm still very proud of that we're able to turn them around.
So I also like you to briefly share a moment that stands out in your mind, something big or even the slightest gesture that was a transformative Phoenix moment for you, one where you had a very significant impact on an individual's life or a group of people.
Mm-hmm. I found that with some parents that were really struggling with us, that they had very negative feelings about us. They had these perceptions of teachers that their students weren't being considered equally as others. And I counseled with them for 6 weeks, and they came in once a week. And eventually, again, once they developed the trust, and I even had the teachers kind of, well, all right, let's put down our swords and come back in and talk like semi-normal people. And once they saw that we were putting forth that kind of effort, we were able to bring them on board and be part of the team. It's never perfect, but at least once people know that you respect them and pull them in, and they really realized that they were misjudging us in a lot of things that we were doing. But we had to listen to them, and we had to, open up in our own hearts to that and listen to a lot of complaints and a lot of concerns, and then work through that and say, well, we're going to stop doing this and start doing that. But nice. You have to be very flexible and very open, and there are no absolute truths when it comes to that, because that person has their own reality. So you got to pull them in so they'll sit with you too, and that you can be on the same team.
So I know you work with a lot of special needs, but people that don't learn, like Matt said, the way other people learn. Mm-hmm. How do you guys decide how to advance or keep from advancing those students through the grades, or what happens program-wise for those students?
Well, I'm a big believer in data. I taught research for years at the university, and you got to go through all these studies, and they call them meta-analyses, that when you're dealing with a particular person that might have some handicapping position or IQ or something like that, you want to find some technique that will actually help them that may be non-traditional. One of the things we did at Phoenix, we were struggling with some of our math scores back when I first came as a consultant.
What's a MAP score? I'm sorry.
No, math score.
Math scores.
Arithmetic, yeah. And I had looked, I'm not a big supporter of vendors. These people sell you software programs and things, unless I dig into it, because the salesman will come to you, oh, yeah, this is the greatest thing since sliced bread. And I said, well, where's your data that shows you got a success? But one of the things I did find at work was the Dreambox math program. And our students were really struggling with it. And the beauty of this, particularly for the lower levels, like kindergarten through third grade, is they actually had cartoons that engaged the kids, and they could win tokens to get special, rewards for that. But it was self-directed. And we found with those lower performing students that we thought we couldn't get to the next grade level, when they could go at their own pace, and this thing would keep coaching you within the software. We still taught them in the regular classroom, but it would keep putting you through pathways, not give you the answer, but show you how to figure it out for yourself. And we raised our test scores that semester from D's to B's across the board with that. And I don't mind saying that Dreambox is one of those more effective software programs, but I'd found out that Harvard had done studies on it. The Walmart Foundation had done studies on it, and I looked at that, and then I did my own study with Phoenix, and sure enough, we got results. But now that took a lot of digging and research, because just to go out and say, I've got this program, or I'm going to be able to do this, you got to look at the research, and people have done study after study after study with your type of students in your type of situations, and most people don't take the time to do that.
Isn't it interesting how, in order to have a phoenix, you first got to have ashes?
Yeah,
That's it.
Exactly.
We have said that, we rising from the ashes, and I've always liked that as our moniker for Phoenix, because we've taken the best and the brightest, and we've taken like Ellis Island, give me you're tired, you're weary, and anybody else you have, because and charter schools take everybody. As long as you get in with the lottery, it doesn't matter where you're coming from. We take you and accept you. A lot of people think that we just teach the best and shoot the rest, but that's not what we do. Because we have across the spectrum for that. And that's one of the myths I like to correct about charter schools, is that we're not these private type schools. I mean, we have students at our schools from 21 different countries. I mean, and all types of socioeconomic levels too.
Exactly.
To me, it's something that is the American way, is it's open to everybody. It is equality with a big E. If you get in there, we're going to take you in, and we're going to do our best we can with you.
Now, before we close, please share with us some thoughts on how we can bring character back into our culture.
Well, I think you have to be relentless with it, and particularly in schools with students, because they're bombarded with media and technology that tells them all kinds of different things. And we have that moral focus every morning. We make it part of our curriculum. And we coach our students in that, and we actually use scenarios to say, okay, let's say somebody calls you a name over here. What are some of the things you would do to respond that way? What would be your first choice to do that? But more importantly, the big people in the room got to model the behavior. If you're a teacher or you're a dean, you can't lose it. You can't show something that's going to say, well, wait a minute, they're not acting with a moral focus here. So we make sure with any new hiree, we put them through that staff development. And we teach that every year. And we have the renewal every year. The first thing we do in our first week of school, okay, let's go back to our character education, moral focus. What are we about here? We're going to make sure that when people come here, we're going to put our best foot forward. We're going to be listening. We're going to be loving. We're going to be caring. And that, to me, turns them around, because next to their parents, the public school teachers and administrators have the greatest influence over a child. That's the first person outside the home that means something to him. And I tell my teachers that every day. You got to come up that sidewalk with love in your heart. I don't care what happened to you last night. You got to come up and go after it and get it done.
Howard Buddy Coleman, thank you for joining us today.
Oh, appreciate the opportunity.
Wow, what an honor. Really?
Yep.
Thank you.
And thank you, Robbie.
That was fun as always, Matt.
Yep. And thank you all for listening. And always remember, everyone can be a phoenix.